Hello and welcome to Ward Talk, CTN's look at the political scene in Ann Arbor. I'm your host, Bonnie Gabowitz. We'll be discussing issues and solutions with the City Council members from our 5 wards on the 3rd Wednesday of each month. Joining us today is Mayor Christopher Taylor. Welcome, Mayor Taylor, and it's been about a year probably since we last talked.
That's probably right.
So
it's a pleasure to be here.
Here it is, the first month of the year 2019.
Excellent.
So it's a great way to start.
Absolutely.
And there's always a lot going on in the city. So I just wanted to start with some of the things that have been ongoing to see where we're at. I know that the budget is in the process of being worked on, but we're still a little early with decisions. So at what point, what are you doing now in terms of, are you investigating expenses, or are you looking at things to reduce?
So the budget cycle, we work on a 2-year budget cycle.
Right.
So this year we'll produce a budget, and we'll also produce a budget plan for next year. This year's budget will ultimately be presented to us by the city administrator in the 2nd meeting of April. We then will have an opportunity to review it along with, of course, members from the public. And then there'll be a public hearing at the 1st meeting in May. And then we will consider the budget and any budget amendments in the 2nd meeting in May.
And is there a chance to have a new initiative, a new project? Does that get brought up at City Council before this budget is actually presented?
Yeah, well, whenever the city administrator just doesn't present us a budget what he thinks it ought to be, there's a lot of preliminary work that goes into it, both of course on the city side and the professional side, but also checking back in with council members. We had a budget retreat a couple of weeks ago. We had a further priority session just last week at the Downtown Development Authority in a work session. And then over the next couple of weeks, we'll have ongoing work sessions focusing on different areas of the city: public works, community services, safety services, and so forth.
So although it's quiet, there's a lot of homework being done.
Absolutely.
Right, okay. So, so nothing really happens until April when the budget is presented, in terms of what we're going to find out.
That's right. The formal presentation of the city administrator's budget will be in the 2nd meeting in April. At that point, we have an opportunity to consider it, amend it. The city charter is such they provide us an obligation to have a balanced budget, but also have an obligation to actually have a budget approved by the end of May. The way it works is that we have the opportunity to amend the city budget that the administrator gives us. If we amend it and then approve it with 7 votes, it becomes the budget. If we do not, for some reason, approve it, then the city administrator's budget, unamended, becomes the budget for the upcoming year.
Okay. All right. Well, we can just put that on the rack for a while.
Exactly.
Okay. And one of the things we had discussed previously, where there was some discussion about revisiting the new water rates that had come into effect this, I believe it was the end of last year. Mm-hmm. Basically, it was based on what kind of a family housing unit it was as to what the rates would be. And I know the council was going to revisit that and come up with maybe a different formula. So where are you at with that?
Sure. Well, that process is also ongoing.
Mm-hmm.
This past spring and summer, well, over the previous basically year, we conducted an extensive cost of service study. With respect to water rates, we're obligated to charge rate users based upon the cost of providing service. So,
and this includes waste, the waste as well as drinking water.
It's kind of a separate.
They're 2 separate things.
They're separate things. So we were providing for clean water a cost of service study, and again, it's how we are obligated to charge residents, all users really, the cost of providing the service. We conducted a study with a nationally recognized consultant with multiple residents from various stakeholder groups. They met I think 5, 6, 7 times going over the structures. We have millions of data points because our water meters are much more, they provide much more information than many water readers. We really can see what's going on an hour-by-hour basis throughout the entire city. And what we realized was that among ordinary residential single-family users, there was fairly wide variance in the cost of providing service. And that is to say that it cost some users, that the cost of providing the service to some users, heavy users, far exceeded the cost of providing service to other users.
And there are variables such as whether you have a garden and you're constantly watering the lawn, and how many people live in the house.
Sure.
So there were variables.
And if you're one of those heavy users, what that means is that for those group of single-family residential heavy users, the infrastructure needed to provide that water to the entire system costs more than the infrastructure needed to provide water to, say, residents in multifamily units or residents who do not use as much water. And so the cost structure that we put forward, the rate structure, which is obligated by law, reflects that higher cost. So if you are a high user, you are obligating the system to have infrastructure ready for you. That's a hard cost, and we are obligated to pass that cost on. So we put forward that rate structure system in the spring, summer. We're taking a second look at it because some council members were interested in doing so. I expect that whatever staff comes forward with will be fairly similar to the previous one, because indeed it's driven by law and data. Also, you know, we have
So let me just interrupt you.
Of course.
So this is going to be decided upon by the council members
Yes.
as to whatever changes there might be.
That's
There
correct.
might not even be any changes.
It's certainly possible. We'll see what comes through it. We also are talking about rate increases rather than merely adjusting the nature of the rates. You know, our water infrastructure is aging. We have pipes underground that are nearing the end of their natural life. We have a water treatment plant, some of the major components of which are 80 years old. You know, we have basins that are literally swirled by logs, and you know we don't have the money under the current rate structure to pay for making sure that infrastructure is ready for the future. And we need to work on that.
Are you saying there's no project or plan in place for starting to replace some of this infrastructure?
Oh, there's a plan, absolutely. We know where the pipes are. We know where they need to be replaced. We know that our water treatment plant has you know, major components of which that are 80 years old and past the end of their useful life. We know too that there are areas of improvement that we need to deploy because of, you know, contaminants that we have in the water and because of changing regulatory environments. So what we need to do is build for you know, a new water treatment plant, making sure that it's there and ready for Ann Arbor for decades to come. And that
So
costs
are you
money.
looking for the water rates to start helping fund this future work?
Absolutely. Well,
So-
this
so
funds
what
current
you're-
and future work.
So what you're saying is people aren't paying just for what water they're using now and paying for the work of the system. It's actually also putting money into a fund for the future of keeping the system in good shape.
That's exactly right. Just as you know, you and I moving to the city today, you know, we don't buy into the system as residents. If you're a developer, you actually do buy into the system.
Right.
In order to tap in, you have to pay a capital charge to pay for the infrastructure that has been created over the years. But as an ordinary resident, that's not something that you and I do. You purchase a house, you don't have a $15,000 water infrastructure fee. That's been paid for by previous rate users. Just as that, similarly going forward, you know, it's our obligation to make sure that, you know, that we leave a water distribution treatment system that's ready for future Ann Arbor.
Okay, well, we'll just stay tuned on that and see
Absolutely.
where it goes. Okay, well, another thing just to finish up is this being January, there was a project of having the deer call. It is just finished.
Yes.
In terms of the action going on, the parks are now clear for use. And sometime in the near future, there will be some kind of report, including a flyover to see how the population has been affected. So that's in the near future, correct?
That's exactly right.
Okay.
I think this past cycle, the cull resulted in the culling of somewhere in the neighborhood of 110, 112 deer. A handful of deer were sterilized as well in accordance with the program. This was the 4th year, if I recollect correctly, and so we'll evaluate where we are and figure out what to do going forward.
Okay, and in terms of the money that you project you'll need for next year when you're working on the budget, will that be influenced by this report?
Absolutely. There'll be a description of what we've done, what we expect is needed going forward, and if council ends up approving the budget for the cull, then that'll occur again next year.
Great. Well, these are all things we've talked about that are ongoing.
Sure.
And when we come back from our break, we're going to talk about some new concerns that we have and what the city is doing to face these problems that have come up.
All right.
Okay, great. We want to hear from you, so please email us questions to ctn@a2gov.org or tweet us at #CTN in Arbor. We're taking a break now, and we'll be back with more with Mayor Taylor.
In Ann Arbor, we stop for pedestrians at crosswalks. Period. It's the law. Hi, I'm Bonnie Gabowitz, and we're back with Ward Talk, and I'm pleased to be sharing this time with Mayor Taylor. It's a January 2019 episode, so we were just talking about some old news that continues to be worked on, so let's just talk about some new things, some new concerns. First of all, let's talk about the PFAS, or however you pronounce it,
Yeah.
PFAS in the water. And this certainly, our water, the quality of our water has been a concern for a while because of the plume contamination, and that's been ongoing, and I know you've been working on getting that rectified. So what's new with the PFAS
Sure.
chemical in the water? Where did it come from, and where do we stand with how we're dealing with it?
Yeah, well, obviously water quality is, of existential concern to really all communities. And Ann Arbor is fortunate to have had excellent water for decades now, and we continue to. Our water is award-winning. We win national contests, win state contests, and we're proud of it.
Yeah, just to clarify, our water comes from where?
Approximately 80% of our water comes from the Huron River. The balance comes from wells to the southeast side of town. You mentioned the docks and plume. It's important to note that is a long-term concern that we have, and is crucially important that we continue to focus on it. But it's also important to note that there has never been any 1,4-dioxane ever distributed in Ann Arbor drinking water. There's none there today. There's never been any water there. It is crucial that we do everything we can to keep it that way, and that's our long-term effort. Folks that are on wells out in Scioto, by way of example, have not been as fortunate as we have. So we need to continue to focus on it.
That's because their water, the well water, comes from the ground, and the ground has absorbed some of this. Is that what you're saying?
In places outside of Ann Arbor, where by way of Scioto Township and elsewhere, where there is contaminated groundwater and where folks are on residential wells, then they are, if they're in the plume area, at risk of having water that's contaminated. The plume has not gotten to the Huron River and has not gotten to Barton Pond, where we get most of our drinking water. We get 80% of our drinking water. And as a consequence, there's never been any 1,4-dioxane in Ann Arbor drinking water. You mentioned PFAS, and that's something that we're very focused on as well. And I'm glad that there is really a national and certainly state concern and attention to it. We've been following PFAS since 2014. It's a chemical that is a forever chemical that doesn't break down very well. It comes from things like waterproofing on pots and pans and slickers, and firefighting foam and the like. And I'm sure there are lots of other industrial uses that I'm not qualified to talk about. But we do have PFAS in Ann Arbor drinking water.
And what you're talking about is, when you say that, you're talking about water is analyzed and they come up with a number of how many units of this in comparison to what's considered a safe level?
Correct. There is no treatment level for PFAS according to the federal government, but there is an EPA level of 70 parts per trillion. 70 parts per trillion, which is an attention threshold. We have not had 70 parts per trillion in Ann Arbor drinking water. It's been, averaging, if I recollect correctly, in the low teens, with some flare-ups here and there, and also some dips. But this is something that we're focusing on. And what we've done, most recently, I think in November or December, is we have committed about $1 million to put in new carbon filters. With these new carbon filters, they've proven to be the most effective way of removing PFAS from drinking water. And as they come online, which will be complete sometime around spring, we expect it to be really effective.
Do you think that because of the Flint crisis and the ongoing discussion of what happened in Flint, people are more concerned, and so that it's important to really keep track of what the numbers are rather than I would just think that there's a lot more concern because there's a history of towns in Michigan that have had serious problems.
Yeah, I think after Flint, we recognize the vital importance of clean water to a community, and I think that's something that's you know, if anything good has come of it, it is sort of a commitment and focus to making sure that the water infrastructure is clean, that the water is good. Something that has also regrettably come from it is a lack of trust in government, and that's why it's really important that that we be as clear as possible, that we be as transparent as possible, that we communicate consistently with residents what's going on with their water, and we strive to do so. But it's also important too that all of us not you know, that we react properly, that we honor the science, and that, you know, I think we as elected officials and others, that we speak mindfully about it.
Right.
You know, we do have PFAS in the drinking water. It is far below the threshold provided by the EPA. We expect it to continue to decrease after we put more carbon filters online, but nevertheless, it is there. You know, I believe Ann Arbor drinking water is safe. I drink it all the time. My family drinks it all the time, and I expect to continue to do so for years.
So this goes along with the report that I read that right now the city is not advising that the school systems provide bottled water because it's just not, it's not reasonable at this point to be trying to protect children from drinking the water because right now it's considered safe enough.
Well, it is safe.
Yeah.
Now, my understanding is that there are some areas of the city, pardon me, that you know, we have control over the water as it gets to the house. After it gets to the house or the business or the location, you know, then it leaves our hands, and there may be contaminants or deposits that come from it as a result of pipes that are internal to the parcel. So that's, I think, something that, you know, residents everywhere need to focus on, making sure they don't have pipes that introduce contaminants. I know that this is something that the school district is focusing on with tremendous clarity and engagement. They want to make sure that their infrastructure, once it, you know, crosses the threshold, is exactly right, and I'm delighted that they're doing that.
So at what point does the city send out some type of advisory for homeowners to evaluate the water or check the pipes? Is there any directive that can at least educate the residents as to what they can do to make sure their property is within reasonable safety of
Yeah, I believe, you know, certainly, I guess I would look to the city's website for water treatment. If any resident has any concern about the water at their location, at their home, or any business has any concern, anybody that is a ratepayer to the city of Ann Arbor that is concerned about the safety and the nature of their water, call us up right away, and we'll work with you to make sure that your water is clean and safe, and provide you whatever assurance we can as to what it is that we do. The folks at the city, we test our water, you know, 145,000 times a year. There's a lot of testing going on for a wide variety of contaminants. Raw water comes in, clean water comes out.
Well, it's good to know that Ann Arbor's really on top of dealing with this very important safety issue. And in the few minutes we have left, an issue came up that really isn't talked about a whole lot, and that's the Greenbelt program, which has been in place for several years now. Just recently, the council voted down purchase of some property. Could you just summarize exactly what it was about?
Yeah.
What is the city looking for in the Greenbelt program?
Sure. Back in 2003, the voters of Ann Arbor passed the Greenbelt millage, the land preservation and acquisition millage. What this millage did is it pledged to use 2/3 of the millage proceeds to purchase land and conservation easements outside of the city of Ann Arbor in order to prevent sprawl. 1/3.
But like neighboring areas that are touching Ann Arbor?
It does not need to be directly adjacent to Ann Arbor. Basically, the goal is to preserve farmland and open space outside of the city to prevent sprawl. The goal, you know, the balance, the 1/3 balance, is to purchase parkland within the city where needed. And we have, over the course of time since 2003, purchased, if I recollect, somewhere in the neighborhood of 5,000 acres worth of land and conservation easements to preserve farms, to preserve open space, and to, you know, prevent sprawl. And part of the deal there was that we would increase density within Ann Arbor because it is economically better to have dense housing. It is environmentally far better to have dense housing.
And we certainly have a lot of new building that's been going on recently and is presently going on, where we have a lot more people able to live in Ann Arbor.
That's right.
Yeah.
The increase has not been has not been geometric by any means. I think we moved anywhere. We've added about 6,000 residents over the past 10 years or so. So there certainly is an increase. It's not shocking from a numeric perspective. But the deal was we're going to increase density downtown, increase density in the community to meet the demand that folks have to live here. Now, part of that is that farmers who want to preserve their land but need some help sell these conservation easements so that they can get the extra cash and essentially pledge permanently that their farmland will never be developed for subdivision
Right.
development.
And what just happened recently?
The Greenbelt Commission brought to us a proposed conservation easement purchase, and the city council voted it down. They declined to exercise the easement. Sometimes,
And this was the first time, wasn't it?
it was the first time ever. Yes, some council members are consistently look for participation by the resident township. In this case, it was Northfield Township, which had not put in funds, although there were other funds associated. Some council members, I guess you'll have to ask them why they voted against it. In my view, it was a mistake. I support the Greenbelt program. I support the preservation of farms, local farms in the area. I think that's really important to us going forward. And I hope that we'll be able to, overcome this, maybe reconsider this one, and hopefully bring it on forward.
Okay, so this Greenbelt program is something that will be interesting for us to watch in the future as to what, whether this will become a new pattern or whether we'll go back to having more land change into the program.
Absolutely.
Well, I want to thank you for being with us.
Always a
and
pleasure.
Talking about the city, and I look forward to lots of interesting things happening in Ann Arbor for 2019.
All right, well, delighted to be here.
And remember to join us for a new episode every third Wednesday of the month. We want to hear from you, so email us at ctn@a2gov.org. Attention, Ward Talk. You can also follow CTN and ask questions on Twitter at twitter.com/CTN in Arbor. We'll make sure to include your questions. For Ward Talk, I'm Bonnie Gabowitz. Until next month.